You're listening to Beyond the Benchtop, a show about food ingredients. Our conversations go far beyond the lab as we dive into topics spanning from food science to market trends and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the St. Charles Trading Podcast Beyond the Benchtop. My name is Kristi and I am the R&D specialist, and today I have my coworker, Mr. David. David, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, Kristi. I'm Dave Nolan, and I am Executive Vice President of Sales with St. Charles Trading, and I've been around 31 years.
Awesome. So what categories do you specialize in?
Kind of everything for my customers. Probably my strength is really in sweeteners, starches, and proteins. But really, as a business, we're in the logistics business also. So just making sure they get what they need when they need it.
Right. A lot of that fine tuning. Great. So today we're going to talk about sugars and sweeteners. So obviously there's the sugar side, which contain calories, and then sweeteners, which are only trace calories. So within that, from a chemical structure standpoint, they are different and they kind of have different applications, but overall provide sweetness to a recipe or when you're putting it into an ingredient deck. So one thing is, obviously, like I said, there's a lot of variants. You know, you have beet sugar, you have cane sugar, and then with sweeteners, you have some that are a little more natural, like the stevia and the monk fruit, and then you have some that are a little more highly processed, like sucralose. Like I said, all varying in different applications. Within each section, so sugar and sweeteners, which would you say are the most commonly purchased variant?
From an aggregate side, outside of St. Charles Trading, the sugar and high fructose corn syrup and other corn syrups are the two largest categories, I'm sure, by billions of pounds. First of all, because they're at the base sweetness level, so they're what everything else is judged off of. So they're the DE equivalent that everything is judged off of. And so if you're using sucralose or aspartame or something like that is literally thousands of times sweeter than sugar, the volume is going to be smaller. If you start looking at how they're used and where they're used, sugar is probably used most broadly and is most widely accepted.
Right.
And then as you start going from there, high fructose corn syrup and corn syrup are broadly used, but they're a declining category. You're seeing a lot of label changes, people trying to move away from those products. Aspartame was the big hit for 25 years. And again, because of label issues, people are moving away and trying to find alternatives. And so I think stevia is probably the most commonly known,
more natural sweetener.
More natural, accepted label acceptance, and so you're seeing a lot of growth in that area right now.
Yeah, definitely, and I think too the FDA created a change that they wanted to make into their nutrition label, and with that, they just wanted to make consumers more aware of what they're putting into their body, as well as being a little more aware of the serving size of products. So that includes, saying this whole entire thing includes 3 servings. But one thing I think that they've done that's made a significant change is they've added the sugars in bold as well as the added sugars. So people are becoming more aware of, does this contain added sugars, even though it might only have 5 grams of sugars, which is a, relatively lower amount, especially if it contains fruit or anything like that, because that has natural sugars. Right. But I think, like you said, that kind of is probably starting to shift the market as well. I think a lot of the time, for years and years, there was a really heavy stigma against sugar. And then now I think it's almost kind of coming back, because people are saying, this is, yes, it is processed, but there's not chemicals in it.
It's a natural product in the sense, that it is a grown product. It's not a chemically modified product.
Exactly.
And I think at some point you have to come down to somewhat the devil when we're making our food choices. So people have become much more accepting as you're replacing high fructose corn syrup with sugar,
Mm-hmm.
the shopper's looking at the label and saying, my pick your product. My applesauce with sugar in it is better than my applesauce with high fructose corn syrup in it.
Exactly.
Whether that's the case or not, the label acceptance says that it is.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I think, we've really seen a lot of that in the last 10 years, and I would presume that it's going to keep accelerating, that it's
Yeah,
going forward that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think now consumers are really starting to look at the the ingredient declarations, to make sure, what does this contain? What am I putting into my body? And they kind of like a more simple ingredient deck. So I think that's kind of starting to kickstart the sugar market once again, even though obviously it's a market that's always relevant and always reach for, not only because of its ability to help flavor and sweeten products, but it also has a lot of different properties as well. It can lower the water activity. It helps with binding. It can
Mm-hmm.
also help with adding texture as well as, softness to different bakery items. And so there's a lot of uses and a lot of benefits of it as well. The next question I have is, what is the number one issue you've been seeing in both of these industries lately?
The longer term play is generationally how, I'll kind of draw a line at the age of 45 or 40, somewhere in that range, how the people under that age range are eating versus how people in my
Mm-hmm.
generation have eaten. And so I think that's the play, that's the biggest factor at play right now in the sugar market, the sweetener market at all, is that, as we talked about, label cleanliness and clarity are what everyone's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll even say people over 45, people in my generation, they're trying to find things that are a cleaner label, a healthier
Mm-hmm.
fit for them. And they've realized that, you can't just do, Pepsi and Doritos all day long.
Yeah,
And you've got to come up with a balance. And so I think that in our industry, that's what we're going to see, is that the sweeteners are going to be under pressure because people are trying to find alternatives to them. But sugar seems
sure.
to be a little bit more resilient in the sense that people
Mm-hmm.
are coming back to it as um, as a safe alternative. They know what it
Yeah,
is, they know what the calories are, they know where it came from, and
yeah.
so I think all of that will be to its benefit.
The next question I have is, in what industry do you think that you will see both sugar and sweeteners grow?
Both the prepared food and the baking industry are probably
Mm-hmm.
going to see a lot of growth as we go forward. And I think that the lifestyle changes that COVID is going to bring on long after it's gone, or has brought on, and will hang on long after it's gone, um, will bring us to um, different eating habits and types of consumption than we've had in the past. So
Mm-hmm.
if the parent or parents both worked, they were always rushing home and trying to pull a meal together. And a lot of times that meant that they stopped and got the meal on the way home.
Right.
And I think that what we're seeing now is, first of all, we've seen a kind of a boom in home baking, and we've seen,
Mm-hmm. I
then,
have personally.
well, yeah, I think every household is, they've made more cookies, they've baked more
Mm-hmm.
bread than anybody's imagined over the last 20 years, 50
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And so I think that change is happening. I think the other thing then that's going to follow that is um, the economics of the world will force people to get their times filled. So you're not going to be able to um, just stop working about 3, and then I'll get dinner prepared for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will again lead us back to what is convenient for us, and that's where the processed foods start coming into play.
Right.
And I think there'll be much healthier processed foods than I grew up with in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still going to have to be something that is easy for a
Convenient.
family to pull together. And so I'd say those two areas you're going to see um, growth by sugar consumption growth in across the board in those areas.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I see from a sweetener standpoint, I see there being an even greater shift in the beverage industry. People are becoming, I would say, more versatile in what they're drinking. It's not just water anymore. It's considered
Hmm.
boring, but they also want something that's going to help hydrate them. So I think, in particular, beverages, whether that be some green tea or a different type of tea beverages that are kind of a healthy alternative, but like many people know, tea is very bitter. So I think from a sweetener standpoint, that's going to really start to grow within that industry. And then I
Right.
think from a sugar standpoint, because of the shift during COVID, and this might change just because restaurants are starting to open up again, but I think there's going to be, since a lot of consumers are mostly at home, a shift to the snack industry. What is the biggest challenge within both of these industries?
Um, the sugar industry, I think they're facing the opposite challenge from
Mm-hmm.
sugar to alternative sweeteners. Um, I think in the sugar industry, you're facing a challenge of people are trying to shed calories and they
Sure.
see sugar or corn syrup, but sugar as an empty calorie in a lot of
Yeah.
respects, and so they still want the sweetness, and so that's sugar's battle. I think on the other side, there is an acceptance issue and an understanding issue, and
Agreed.
then finally there will be at some level a capacity issue, and that will take care of itself over time. But you're seeing um, products that are in demand being very, very difficult to get, and so the ability to grow a category if you can't get the
Mm-hmm.
product, um, obviously those two things can't go together. So they're going to have to grow capacity. Finally, I'd say that the one thing that may or may not come into play is um, where products are sourced and your
Mm-hmm.
trust in the country of origin. I think that is an issue that will probably be at the forefront more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not made in America, but certainly I think there's going to be some sort of belief in the supply nation that starts outweighing just the fact that I want a product.
Yeah.
And I'd say that through the last 4 years, we've seen a lot of changes in our perception of imports in general, and I think that's going to carry over into the food industry.
Yeah, definitely. I think now that, after FASMA was put into place, I think now consumers really start to trust what's being transported into the United States because of the amount of supplier verification that
Hmm.
occurs ahead of time. It's not only on their end, but our end as well, really making sure that there's credibility there and making sure it's both safe and high quality.
Right. I would
Yeah.
agree. I think that's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, and I think too, from an issue standpoint, like you said, kind of the acceptability of sugar because it's an ingredient that we will absolutely always need. But
Hmm.
I think now it's kind of becoming a little, there's a shift in the amount of sugar added into things. Maybe they're trying
Right.
to see decreases. But like we said, I think it's a product that no matter what, it's kind of like salt. It's always going to be needed and it's always going to be a want for both
Right.
customers and consumers. Do you believe that both of these markets have become more competitive
Uh,
over the years?
Yes, I would say though that in the sugar business, because of the protections in the U.S. market from imports, that the competition has been a little bit more muted, um, and really what you've seen is the there's competition on a local basis, but on a growing basis, all the growers and the processors um, kind of almost have a guaranteed market share. And so
Mm-hmm.
as long as they run their businesses well, they can make money. And then we've had a few hiccups in the last few years with weather specifically,
Yeah.
and crop sizes being affected by that have caused the market to be very tight the last few years. So you weren't as worried about the competitiveness as actually just getting product, but
Availability.
um, yeah, but yes, I think they're going to have to respond, especially if you see demand flatten or drop, then yes, it'll be a very, very competitive market. And the ability to effectively produce at the lowest possible cost is going to be key. And that's going to weed out, the sugar industry went through a lot of consolidation over the last 30 years. I'm not sure there's much more it can do, but there may be a few weak facilities that get weeded out.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. I think that it's not really competition as much as it is availability. I think the climate and the weather is a huge contender within that. So that kind of makes it a little bit unpredictable. But one thing I think St. Charles Trading does a really good job of is understanding what can go wrong will go wrong. So really
Yeah.
being able to be ready and prepped for that. Where do you personally hope to see a shift in both the sugar and sweetener industry?
Well, I sell sugar, so I'd like to see a lot of sugar be consumed. I'd say for the foreseeable future, I think sugar will play a huge role, but you're going to, around the edges, you're going to keep seeing it nibbled away at by high intensity and more natural sweeteners that people want to use. And the biggest issue will be can those become commercially available in sizes, quantities, and prices that are acceptable to 300 million Americans, and not just the top of the economic ladder. But I think that the sugar market itself is going to be healthy and strong for 20, 30 years before those transitions take place.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of like how you said that you really want to see a shift as well as kind of some more growth within those healthier alternatives for sugars. I mean, monk fruit really does act like sugar, but the problem is it doesn't brown like sugar does. There's no caramelization between different ingredients in a recipe. So I think that's something that I kind of hope to be able to possibly maybe overcome, finding kind of like a blend between, monk fruit and maybe a little bit of natural sugar. So it's still a reduction in calories, but able to have that caramelization reaction that, us as consumers and as well as customers love to see, and as well as love the taste of as well.
That's right. That's the key.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David, for taking time out of your day.
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot from you, so I hope you learned a little bit from me as well. Thank you very much.
I did. Thank you very much. Take care. Enjoy.
You as well.
Thanks for listening. Follow or subscribe so you can always catch the latest episode. For more information, check out our website at stcharlestrading.com.